Well, hello and welcome to Blue Ridge Community Church. My name is Jeremy. I'm one of the pastors, teachers, and elders here at Blue Ridge. We are excited you are here. If you are new here and you're coming in because we know every week is someone's first week, you're coming in here and you're going, what on earth is up with all these tables? What you're seeing is our attempt to be as obedient as possible as a church to Jesus's command in Matthew 28 to his disciples to make disciples. And so there are several things given the environment we're in on a Sunday morning that we believe can help facilitate making disciples. And one of those is community. And the other one is learning that moves beyond just information into actual application. And so we believe that tables rather than traditional rows helps facilitate those two things better. And so we've been experimenting through the summer with this whole idea of tables. And so last week we had a more traditional service in that the speaking was primarily from up front, led from up front, more traditional talk. And then this week, our service is built around interaction at the table. Still led from up front, but interactions at the tables. Now, if you are a regular here at Blue Ridge, I see you guys getting better and better at it each week. I saw some people switching around ahead of time. That is awesome. I love it. But you probably know what's going to happen next, that we want to continue to put the community in Blue Ridge Community Church, okay? And so in a moment here, I'm going to ask everyone to stand up, not right this moment, but in a moment, I ask everybody to stand up, face away from your table. And what we want you to do is, because we found out that really tables, as we've been experimenting with this, we found out that tables really work best if there's 4 or more people at every table. We found that tables work best if you're not just with your immediate family. That if you can intermix with some other people, even just another 1 or 2 people at your table would be great. So here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna have you stand up. We're gonna, in a moment, face out. And would you introduce yourself to someone at another table? And if it looks like they're there just with their family and you've got room, would you invite them to your table? If they're just there with 1 or 2 people or 3 people, would you invite them to your table? If you don't have enough room at your table, would you help facilitate connecting some people? And if you're sitting there going, oh boy, people are gonna be coming to us in there, and that's gonna make you really uncomfortable, just know they're just as uncomfortable as you, and they're bridging that gap too, okay? So stand up, face out, and go introduce yourselves. Okay. Awesome, guys. Start making your way back to your new tables, your original tables. Love it, guys. I love watching, from my perspective, people literally walk across a room just to engage. It just fills me with just the desire that I do believe that God wants for us to have, that we see people and we notice people and we step outside of our comfort for the sake of other people. Love that, guys. So now you guys know that if you've been regulars here, now is your time to grab a piece of paper from a card from the center, fold it in half, put your name on one side of that and face it out away from you, so the people you just met or you're sitting with maybe for the first time, they don't have to remember your name. They can just have a little cheat sheet in front of you. While you're doing that, let me once again talk to those that are joining us online. Those of you watching online, we are so excited you're joining us here. And as we've said each time as we're going throughout this summer, we genuinely believe that for you to get the most out of this experience, we would love for you to create your own little environments in your home, at your work, at a cafe, whatever else it is. And so you may live alone, and you may go, I can't gather with other people. I don't have anybody to connect with to wrestle through this. Well, we would encourage you to pray throughout this week. What environment do you have connections in that you can maybe invite someone to be a part of this? You don't have to do this on a Sunday morning. The beauty of YouTube and these streaming services is that you can stream this anytime you want. But we would love to hear, and we actually in fact, are starting to hear stories of people connecting in different environments all throughout, even in different countries, connecting through these, connecting with a group of people, connecting with their family, and wrestling through this to get the most out of what we want this experience to be. Let me just leave you with this if you're online. You know, being a part of the church is just not watching a church service. Being a part of church is entering into community and wrestling through stuff with one another. And we want you to be a part of that, even from a distance. So, awesome, guys. You've written your names down. So, Here's what we want to do. We are continuing in this series. We called this series The Summer of the One Another's. And we've called it that because in these 59-ish, and it depends on how you break it down, you get maybe somewhere between 55 and 60, 59-ish one another's that commands we find in the New Testament. They are all practical ways in which we can love one another the way Jesus loved us. And as we've talked about, Jesus told his disciples the way that we love one another, how well we do that, the way he's loved us, by looking at the way he's loved us and loving each other that way, is the way that the world is gonna look at us and go, oh, we know who they belong to. They belong to Jesus. It's gonna be the way that the world looks at Jesus and goes, oh, you might actually be who you claim to be. And it's the way that the world is gonna begin to experience God's love for them, flowing out of the way that we love one another. Now, obviously, we can't go through all 59 in just a couple, even 6-7 weeks, or the entirety of the summer. So we've grouped them into 5 groups where we're learning what it looks like to practically love one another well. And so last week, we looked at this idea of humility. And in that, we looked at a passage found in Philippians chapter 2. This is Paul's letter to the church at Philippi. And this is what he wrote to them. He says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one in mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, there's our word, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, so there's that one another idea, have the same mindset as Christ. He's our example, who being in the very nature of God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. And it was from this section of Paul's letter to the church at Philippi that we came up with a working definition of humility. And what I mean by a working definition is you're not gonna look this up in Webster's dictionary, you're not gonna find this exact thing, but from Paul's description of Christ and his humility directed towards us, that we can see and we can start to work out what humility looks like and what humility will look like applied in our everyday life. So this working definition of humility is valuing others above ourselves. Humility is looking to the interests of others. If I had room, I told you guys last week, I would have said first. Taking on the role as a servant. Humility is learning to lay down our rights for the sake of the people sitting at our tables right now. For the sake of the person sitting next to you, across from you. That's humility applied in our lives, is when we begin to operate and look at the world through this lens. And so today we look at this, and it's easy for us to intellectually understand the concept of humility. But living out humility applied to our lives, like actually living life through these lenses, that's a whole nother thing. And that's why when we are a follower of Jesus and his Spirit is inside of us, and we begin to live out things like this through his power, we'll stand out as different, because this is not the way the natural world operates, but it's what he calls us in his upside down kingdom to look like as we express humility towards one another because of Christ's humility expressed towards us. And so today we want to continue to wrestle through this idea of humility, and we want to bring it down to this place where we are applying it in which the environments in which God has called us to exist and apply it to one another. So would you pray with me? Jesus, I thank you for what Paul wrote there. I thank you for what it displays, Jesus. Your humility on the cross, your humility in laying down your rights, your humility in valuing us above yourself, looking not to your interests, but to ours. Your humility in serving us. And it's all pictured for us. It comes to this culminating moment of you on the cross. I think of that moment where where your disciples had deserted you, all but one of them. And there with Roman soldiers making fun of you, the religious elite mocking you, calling for you to call yourself down, saying this is your king. Just all of that, you said, Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing. When you could have called a legion of angels down and wiped everyone out, you chose to humble yourself for us. Jesus, would you show us how to live out that same radical humility directed towards one another because of what you've done in us first? It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Awesome. So here's where we want to begin. Here's where we want to start with our discussions at our tables. I want to start with this question. Who is a person in your life you would characterize as humble? Okay? What is characteristic, or what characteristics or actions are true of them? So think back, growing up. This may have been an athlete you played sports with. They were just humble. And what characterized? How do you know that they characterize humility? This may have been a teacher. This may have been your parents. This may have been a relative. This may be in your current environment, your boss, the person you work alongside, you work for. Maybe it's wherever you're the expert in the field and you look at someone who you know is just as much of an expert as them, yet they never put off in that way. What things would characterize? Well, who's a person in your life that you would characterize as humble? And what characteristics or actions would be true of them? So while you're thinking, let me get started here and just share with you, for me, it would be one of the most humble people I know is Nan Torrance. If you're new here, she's the wife of Woody Torrance, the pastor who in 91 founded Blue Ridge Community Church. He's at our Bedford campus most Sundays now there, but it's his wife. Nan, one of the most humble people I know. Woody for years refused to take a salary from Blue Ridge. And in fact, he currently, once again, does not take a salary from Blue Ridge, but there was a season where he did. But before that, and he refused to do it, Nan was a sole provider for their family. And she never complained about it, never even brought people's attention to it, never put that out there for Woody, things like that. She just played the role that she felt like God had asked her to play as a sole provider for their family for years. Nan, in doing that, at one point, she got a temp job at a very big company here in Lynchburg, employs thousands of people, and she was a temporary admin, I believe is what the position was, and in just a couple of years, worked herself up in her department to the senior ranking female in her department in just a couple of years from a temp worker. Because of that, because of some things that she instituted in there, she received a national reward or award and recognition. She's talked to thousands of people. In fact, if you talk to Woody, he'll tell you that Nan's talked to larger crowds than what he's ever talked to. Okay? Nan, I don't know how she does it, but she joins Woody in all of his crazy adventures, hiking and going across this world and different places like that. She's summited, along with Woody, some of the tallest peaks on several of the continents, and the woman doesn't exercise. Doesn't. She'll tell you, she does it. She does it regularly. She just puts her head down and follows along and joins in. And yet, here's the deal. You go on a road trip with her, she'll ask you 100 questions about you without ever sharing anything. She doesn't try to do the one-up thing. Oh yeah, I've done this. If anything, she points towards Woody and tells stories about him. She's one of the most humble people I know. What about you? What's one of the most humble people in your life, what that you know, what characteristics or actions are true of them? Okay, you're gonna have about 6 minutes, so like I usually do, don't follow my example, you can't talk that long, okay? You're gonna have about 6 minutes, go around, share, give someone the gift of going second by you jumping off and going first. At about halfway, I'll let you guys know. Go for it, 6 minutes. halfway, 3 minutes left. One minute left. 1 minute left. Okay. So, now we get a little bit more vulnerable. We get to celebrate the humility in other people and what we've seen, but it wouldn't be very humble if we celebrated the humility in us, right? So we got to go someplace else with this. Here's this. What if we started here? In what environments or relationships do you struggle with humility, okay? We all struggle someplace with humility. What environments or relationships do you struggle, or in what? Do you struggle with humility? Maybe it's just this right now. You struggle being vulnerable in an environment you don't like, when you have to put out where you don't add up. Maybe you're a perfectionist in that. And so any place where your perfectionism gets questioned, maybe that's you. Maybe this would be a time to start saying that's where I struggle with humility. Maybe you're a teenager and it's with your parents. Maybe you're in the workforce and you're older, you're on the other side, you're on the back side of your career, and it's with all of these young people coming in, just out of college. You don't think they have the same work ethic that you had when you came out of school. They didn't have a job when they were 5 years old like you did. Maybe it's on the other side. You're coming out of college and you're looking at all the way that they've done things forever, and you've got better ideas, and that why can't they come out of the ancient and move into the modern? Maybe it's where you know that you're the expert. You're the smartest person in the room. You've been doing whatever it is you've been doing. Where do you struggle Maybe it's when you read comments online that you just view as ignorant. Maybe you're not a follower of Jesus and you're here and it's in environments like this where you look at a group of people and you say, I can't believe you guys believe this. That's okay. Like, we love the fact that this, part of this is us getting to know one another. So knowing that that's where you're at is, we're not gonna be offended by that. We want you to share exactly what it is. We don't want you to put on a face. Where do you struggle with humility? You're gonna have 7 minutes, okay? Go for it. Halfway. 1 minute left. Okay. Maybe some of you are saved by the bell. So, in this discussion about humility, as we looked at last week of building our working definition of humility, we looked at Philippians 2, like we talked about earlier. Well, now I want to turn the page into Philippians 3. In Philippians 2, Paul uses Christ as the example of who we're supposed to model. In Philippians 3, we're gonna see Paul starts talking about himself and starts talking about his wrestling through this whole idea. So here's what I'd love for you to do. Over the next 10 minutes, what I want you to do is I want you to have someone at your table read from Philippians 3, 4 through 11. Okay? Now, here, I wanna add something this week. Would you maybe 2 people will read at your table? Because sometimes just listening to it one time isn't enough. So have somebody read it from one version, and then maybe like they read it from the NIV or something like that. Choose another version. Most of us have Bible apps or things like that, or my guess is if you got paper Bibles, there's different versions. Try to stay in the modern versions if you can. It will be most helpful for everyone at the table. If you can stay in a more modern version, a translation, things like that. So have someone read it through, and then someone else at the table use another version, read through that same section, and then together start to discuss, what does Paul's perspective teach us about humility? What are principles we see? What are things that further help us understand and apply? Because Paul's gonna use real world kind of examples in himself. What does it teach us about this idea of humility? So take the next 10 minutes. I'll let you know when we're about halfway through. Go for it, guys. halfway. 5 minutes left. One minute. 1 minute. Okay. So what I love and what stood out to me as I've read through that multiple times with the perspective of humility, because there's lots of different perspectives you have, but I love, because if you know much about Paul, he doesn't actually necessarily come across as the most humble guy. When you read his books and you read his interactions with people. And so he starts off, he lays out his resume, he said, hey guys, if anybody should be able to put confidence in who they are, the expert, the field that he was in, is all these things. He's like, it's me. But then there's this switch where there is this eagerness by him to gain Christ, this eagerness that he knows the only way is joining Christ in his example that he's just talked about in the previous chapter, in chapter 2. This eagerness to join him in his suffering for the sake of other people. The eagerness to die to things for the sake of others' interests above his own. Placing others' needs, to become the servant like Christ became the servant for us. And then I love, this is a section I didn't have you read, but it's gonna lead us into our actual last question for the morning. It's this, verse 12, look how he continues. So he goes through, this is what I'm eager to do. Not that I have already obtained all of this or have already arrived at my goal. Just admitting I'm a work in progress, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ took hold of me. I'm able to humble myself because Christ humbled himself for me. I'm able to love other people the way that Christ loved me. I'm pressing on towards that. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself, he says it again, yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining, listen to that word, straining toward what is ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Paul saying, hey guys, I am a work in progress. This is what I'm eager to experience. This is what I'm eager to join in. I could put my confidence over here, but yet I want the same type of attitude that Christ Jesus had that I talked about in my second chapter of my letter to you all. So we're all a work in progress. We know that. We know we're sitting at tables with people in a work in progress because we've talked about it. And so based on the people that we see in our life that characterize humility, based on where we struggle, based on our working definition of what humility looks like, based on what we've read over the last couple of weeks in Philippians 2 and Philippians 3, here's the deal. Here's the final question for today. What is one thing? We always want to leave this in a place that moves it from our heads into our hands, from our hearts into the application. What is one thing you can put into practice this week that will allow you to press on and take hold of a little more humility? So for me, it's best articulated in story format first. We were on an elders retreat probably 6 or 7 years ago. We're in Texas, we're at Big Bend National Park there. Woody loves the experiential learning for all of us. So we're on one of his experiential learning adventures, and we are backpacking in this area, and it snowed, I think, even the night before. So it's cold, it's in the winter time. And so we're tired after not a great night's sleep. And on the way out of this section of the hike, Woody turns to the 3 other guys who had less hiking experience than Woody and myself and said, hey, you guys lead us out of here. I immediately went like, I don't like that idea. I didn't say it, but I didn't like it. And sure enough, we get to this Y in the trail, this fork in the road. And I know we're supposed to go right. I know that's the direction. I've got a good sense of direction in the wilderness. I know we're supposed to head right. And Woody lets these guys lead us left. And I know with every step we're taking in the opposite direction, that's just more we're gonna have to backtrack. And I wanna be back at the car. I wanna be eating at a buffet that morning. I wanna be doing something else other than hiking in the wrong direction in the cold after a bad night's sleep out camping. But I watch as Woody just lets these guys go and go and go. I don't know how far we went, but my attitude, it was far enough. When one of them goes, guys, I actually think we're headed in the right direction. And they talk about it, they wrestle through it, we turn around, we backtrack, and sure enough, I was right. We had headed in the wrong direction. But for them, and what Woody was trying to show us is the way we need to lead is allow people enough leash to experiment, to try, even when we know a quicker way. It's gonna be much better if they learn it and discover it on their own than us just tell them. I struggle with that. If I know the shortest way is this way, I wanna just speak up and say, let's get us this way. When I feel like I'm the smartest one in the room, I wanna tell you, this is the way that we're gonna get to this place over here, let's go, rather than allow people to discover. So for me, it's about being in those environments of allowing people to discover the way themselves and be along with the journey and celebrate what God does in them. That's for me what mine would be. What about you? What's a way you can apply humility in this next week to become a little bit more humble, to press on, take a little bit more, like Paul talks about in Philippians 3. Okay, you got about 12 minutes. Go for it. Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you. One thing I would have pushed, I put on this slide because I do think it's gonna help us practice humility with one another. After a person shares, I want one of you at the table to pray for them. And you go, wait, I'm not comfortable with praying out loud. Valuing others above yourself. Becoming the role of the servant, laying down your rights. That person needs your prayers, whether you think that or not. So those of us that are experts, please don't be expert prayers in this moment, short and sweet. Those of you that are non-experts, it's okay to be short and sweet. Go for it, guys. halfway, 6 minutes left. I'm actually gonna give you a 2-minute warning. That way, if you're way out of whack with your timing, you know to really hustle now. Okay, guys, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting right in the middle of you praying for someone. Here's what I want to do. We did this a few months ago. Maybe it was even the first week we ever did this, back in January, actually. Guys, what's happening here is not going to just, what we're talking about is just not naturally going to happen. It is only gonna be through the Spirit of God working through us. And part of the Spirit of God working through us is we are desperately in need of one another's prayers. So here's what I want you to do as an application to kind of go away beyond just your humility application. Would you grab the card of one person that's not you? And would you just write down on their card something that they said that stood out to you? It doesn't even have to be the last thing that they shared. It can be something that they said that stood out to you about them, about where they struggle, about whatever it may be. And would you commit to just simply praying for them throughout this week? This is how we place others above ourselves, looking to their interests above our own. This is how we serve one another in a practical way. This is how we lay down our rights and go, you know what? I'm gonna lay down my schedule thing just for a small bit, just to pray for this other person at my table. So if they didn't get the opportunity to share, maybe stay afterwards and let them share with you something else. Okay, let me pray as we dismiss. Jesus, I thank you for this opportunity. I love it. I love watching people just immediately grab cards. And I love that there will be, because of this, God, I know some of us will forget. There's grace. But in that, I know that there will be prayers that are prayed. I was just sitting with a group of people the other day when I heard somebody reference that they had been praying for people that were on their card that first week. And so God, I know that when we do that, you will show up and you will respond. So I pray that we could be a humble type of people that could love each other through humility the way that you loved us, knowing that we're a work in progress and that we could press into this week in new ways, and we could just watch you move powerfully in that. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Guys, go out and love one another.